The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Worcestershire for the first time in quite a long time. We've only ever done 3 episodes so far in this county. Well, by the end of this week there's going to be 8 of them, because all week this week I'll be taking on 5 in a brand new area, and that is the Malvern Hills. Right now I'm standing in a little village called Harpley, and you can find this in the parish of Lower Sapey. Lower Sapey, wet ground. Hello folks, time to start a brand new area of Worcestershire this week. This is the Malvern Hills area, and today we begin a journey through 5 of Worcestershire's most quietly beautiful corners, starting with the parish of Lower Sapey. Lower Sapey, historically known as Sapey-Pritchard, began as a chapelry of Clifton-upon-Team and may have functioned as a distinct parish as early as the late 13th century. Its name likely derives from the Old English sapig, meaning sappy, perhaps referring to a local stream or some wet ground. The settlement developed in a remote hilly landscape northwest of Worcester, forming part of the upper division of the Doddingtree Hundred. Lower Sapey became a civil parish in 1895, marking its full administrative independence. This episode will blend landscape, architecture and deep-rooted history with hamlets, lanes, brooks and 2 remarkable churches that together tell the story of a rural community shaped by centuries of change. We'll begin in Harpley, a small settlement whose charm lies in its tranquility and its Victorian-era church. Dedicated to St Bartholomew, it's a building that, despite its relatively late 19th century construction, stands as a testament to the parish's evolving ecclesiastical identity. Its creation in the 1870s marked a shift away from an ancient Norman church deeper in the valley at Lower Sapey itself. We'll then take to the road, driving down Hollybush Lane, a route that dips and winds through wooded banks and open farmland. That descent leads us to Sapey Brook, a modest watercourse that once powered local industry. Though peaceful today, the brook was historically a source of energy and livelihood. On Sapey Brook itself is the site of Hope Mill. Water-powered, it once harnessed the brook's flow. While the mill no longer operates, its presence shaped the local economy and stands as a reminder of how even small, rural brooks played vital roles in pre-industrial and early industrial life. From there, we'll continue our journey into Lower Sapey proper, historically known as Sapey-Pritchard. It's a small settlement, yes, but it shifted in identity over the centuries, once being tied ecclesiastically to Clifton-upon-Team before becoming fully independent in the 18th century. Once there, we'll arrive at the old St Bartholomew's Church, perched on a bank. A Norman building, located above a stream and surrounded by farmland, it's one of Worcestershire's most atmospheric rural churches, declared redundant in 1993 and now cared for by the Church's Conservation Trust. Let's begin in Harpley, a small, scattered hamlet lying just north of Lower Sapey. Its quiet lanes, timber-framed cottages and hedgerow-lined footpaths give it a sort of timeless feel. Though modest in size, Harpley became increasingly important in the 19th century. As you walk through Harpley, you notice how the landscape opens and closes, one moment enclosed by woodland, the next revealing wide views across the Team Valley. This mixture of enclosure and openness is characteristic of the area's medieval field systems. Harpley's development culminated in the construction of a new parish church designed by the architect Frederick Kempson. Its creation effectively made Harpley the spiritual centre of the area and reflects a Victorian commitment to providing more substantial buildings for scattered parishes like this. St Bartholomew's Church was built in 1876 and 77, replacing an ancient Norman church at Lower Sapey. Its construction provided a more convenient place of worship for residents who found the old church difficult to reach, especially in the winter. The church's architecture is typical of Victorian ecclesiastical design, practical, modest, and built to serve a rural congregation. While not as architecturally dramatic as its Norman predecessor, it embodies the Victorian commitment to parish life and community cohesion. Inside, the fittings originally came from the old St Bartholomew's Church in Lower Sapey. The transfer of furnishings symbolised continuity, a way of ensuring that the spiritual heart of the area remained intact, even as the physical centre shifted. The church's location in Harpley also reflects a demographic change. As farming practices evolved and settlement patterns moved uphill, the parish needed a church closer to where people actually lived. Harpley, with a growing cluster of homes, became the natural choice. Though Victorian, the church maintains a sense of rural simplicity. Its interior is uncluttered, its windows modest, and its atmosphere is peaceful. They are features which are a stark contrast to the more ancient, atmospheric and historically layered church in the valley below. The churchyard, like many in Worcestershire, contains graves of local farming families whose names appear in parish records stretching back centuries. These stones form a quiet archive of community history. St Bartholomew's at Harpley also reflects the ecclesiastical jurisdictional shifts of the parish. Lower Sapey was originally a chapelry of Clifton-upon-Team before becoming fully independent in the 18th century, and this Victorian church continued that independent identity. Now, in the porch here of St Bartholomew's Church, we've got a notice board and several items on sale over here. There's a pad and stickers, there's a tote bag, there's a notebook, all three items £15 apparently. But that's not what I'm interested in here. I'm actually interested in the notice board itself, and that's because the long-time viewers know this already, but if you're new, when I come across one of these things, I leave one of these cards to let people know that I've been. So let's do that here in Harpley. Even though this is the parish of Lower Sapey, this is where most people actually live. Leaving Harpley, we descend Hollybush Lane, a narrow, twisting road typical of the Worcestershire uplands. The hedgerows here are thick with hazel, hawthorn and elder, and in spring the verges burst with primroses and stitchwort. As the lane drops, the landscape becomes more enclosed, signalling our approach to the valley floor. The sound of running water grows louder, and soon we'll reach Sapey Brook, a small but historically significant watercourse. This descent mirrors the parish's own historical geography, from the Victorian uplands back into the older medieval heart of Lower Sapey, where water, mills and ancient churches shaped community life. Sapey Brook may appear modest, but like many rural streams, it once powered local industry. Its steady flow made it ideal for driving water wheels, and Hope Mill, located nearby, relied on this brook for its operation. Watermills were essential to rural economies before industrialisation. They ground grain, processed wool, and sometimes powered small workshops. Hope Mill would have served local farms, reducing the need to transport grain to larger market towns. The brook's gradient and reliability made it particularly suitable for milling. Even small changes in water level could affect productivity, so mills like the one at Hope were carefully positioned to maximise flow. Though the mill no longer operates, traces of its presence remain in the landscape. Hope Mill's existence also helps explain why the old St Bartholomew's Church was built where it was. It was close to the valley's economic and social centre in medieval and early modern times. There's nothing quite like the sound of rushing water. It's one of my things that I love quite a lot. And out here it's so peaceful otherwise that the water is really the only thing you can hear apart from the birds in the trees. Well, now we're going to drive away from the brook and we're going to head into Lower Sapey itself. Continuing along the valley, we approach Lower Sapey, historically known as Sapey-Pritchard. The name possibly derives from the Old English sapig, meaning sappy, perhaps referring to a stream or some wet ground. Lower Sapey was originally a chapelry of Clifton-upon-Tees before gaining full ecclesiastical independence in the 18th century. Its remote location meant that for centuries it remained a small, scattered community centred around farming. As we enter the village, the landscape opens slightly, revealing the old church perched above the stream, a timeless scene that's changed little since Norman times, and given how rural and out of the way this all is, it's one that might well exist in this form long into the future. The old St Bartholomew's Church is one of Worcestershire's hidden gems. Built in Norman times, it stands on a steep bank above the stream, reached by that long, winding lane. Its isolation is part of its charm. The church's simplicity is striking. The oak porch, weathered to a silvery grey, leads to a Norman doorway that's welcomed worshippers for nearly 1,000 years. Inside, the building is plain and unadorned. It has plastered walls, a clay and gravel floor, and a small west gallery. Faint wall paintings survive on the north wall, including fragments of a medieval scheme and part of a 17th century royal coat of arms, featuring a lion. Most of the church's fittings were removed to the new Harpley Church in 1876. After that, the old church fell into neglect and was even used as a farm building, a fate not uncommon for redundant rural churches. For over a century, the building deteriorated. Only in the last 20 years it was rescued through local effort and placed under the care of the church's Conservation Trust after being declared redundant in 1993. Today, the church stands as a preserved historical monument rather than an active parish church. The surrounding landscape enhances its character via a 17th century timber-framed farmhouse which stands nearby. In summer, the porch here can often be seen draped in honeysuckle. So yeah, it does look a bit bare in here, but the reason for that is obvious because all the fittings and fixtures and stuff are now in the new church, which is in Harpley, and all you've got now here is just basically an empty shell. And it's very echoey because of that. My voice is bouncing off these walls. It's interesting though to see a church like this, one that's absolutely, bereft of anything other than just basically a cross where the altar would have been, and not much more, to be fair. There's still got the gallery at the end here, but everything else has disappeared. So that's really all there is to Lower Sapey Parish. We've now seen Harpley, we've now seen Lower Sapey itself, and now we're going to drive out towards the next village, which is a lot bigger than either of these two places have been. We're going to drive down another muddy lane. I think muddy lanes at this time of year are sort of part of the course around here. My car is certainly not as clean as it was when I arrived here this morning. Just before we do that drive, actually, I have to make a mention of the lady I've just been talking to, who saw me from her kitchen window and was very keen to come and talk to me about the church and everything like that. Apparently some of the fixtures and fittings in that church are in private homes as well as in the new church in Harpley. So it's quite amazing where they've all ended up, quite frankly. This tour of Lower Sapey has taken us from the Victorian heart of Harpley to the medieval soul of the old village, tracing the parish's evolution through its churches, lanes, brooks and historic industries. Lower Sapey remains a place where history is written into the landscape. From the quiet flow of Sapey Brook to the weathered stones of its Norman church, this is a parish that rewards curiosity, offering visitors a deep sense of connection to England's rural past. Funnily enough, the same can be said for the other 4 we're going to visit across the rest of this week. Hello folks, welcome back to Malvern Hills for round number 2. Now yesterday in Lower Sapey we saw that the weather at the moment is a little bit foggy and misty. Well, it's still a little bit of a pea souper here in the next village over. Now this is more of a village. This isn't some kind of scattered hamlet all over the place with muddy lanes and stuff like that. This is actually a village and its name is Clifton-on-Team. Clifton-upon-Team, Cliff Farm on the Dark River. Today we come to Clifton-upon-Team, a parish where landscape and history are so tightly woven together that once you've seen it with a historian's eye, you can't unsee it. Perched on a high spur above the River Team, this village is located between Worcester and Tenbury Wells. Clifton-upon-Team has deep early roots with evidence of Roman activity in the surrounding landscape, but it's best understood as a classic Anglo-Saxon settlement. At around 600 feet above the River Team, it developed along the ancient salt route linking Droitwich to Leominster. The earliest written reference appears in a charter of King Athelstan in 934 AD, granting the settlement, then called Cliston-ultra-Tame, to the monks of St Peter's in Worcester. Its early inhabitants farmed communally, rotated crops, kept pigs in Clifton Wood, and gathered honey. By the Norman and medieval periods, Clifton had become a place of growing local importance. A priest is recorded here at the time of the Domesday Book, and the parish church of St Kenelm, dating from the 13th century, remains one of the village's most significant historic buildings. During the turbulent era of conflict with the Welsh, the manor of Clifton took shape, and in 1270 the village was granted royal borough status, allowing it to hold a weekly market and a 4-day annual fair. The medieval manor house, built around 1200 on the site of today's Lion Inn, later evolved into a hostelry for travellers. Clifton's medieval and early modern history is also tied to notable local families, including the de Wishams. The village later became part of the Stanford Court estate, passing to the Winnington family in the 18th century, and remained under estate ownership until a major sale in 1932 dispersed many of its farms and houses. Today, the village retains much of its historic character, a hilltop community with a medieval church, historic inns, and a landscape shaped by centuries of farming and trade. Clifton is far from a sleepy backwater now. We'll begin, as so many village stories do, at the parish church of St Kenelm, a rare dedication to a boy king of Mercia murdered on the Clent Hills and remembered here in stone since the 1200s. From there, we'll weave down through the village. In the surrounding landscape is Woodmanton Manor, the New Inn and the Pitlands Farm holiday complex, and we'll cover those as we head down to the B4204 bridge over the River Team. Finally, we'll go to Ham Castle, where power, defence and status were once paramount. We begin at the Lit Gate of St Kenelm's Church, a building that contains almost every layer of Clifton's story. The church is mainly 13th century, with a chancel and a nave from that period and a south aisle added in the 14th century. Built in local sandstone, it stands proudly above the village, a reminder that faith, status and visibility were deeply intertwined when this settlement took shape. Look up at the west end and you'll see the sturdy 13th century tower with its brooch spire. The tower's 3 stages, marked by moulded string courses, are classic early Gothic. The spire has had a dramatic life. The original masonry version was blown down in the 17th century, rebuilt and then struck by lightning in 1884 and replaced with the wooden shingled spire we see today. As well as a spire, the early 14th century aisle is notable too, as is the timber-framed porch. Behind the latter sits a beautifully simple early Gothic doorway. Inside, the 13th and 14th century core here is still clearly seen. Victorian restorations by Harvey Eggington and James Cranston later added their own touches. The restorations were part of a national movement to improve medieval churches, and St Kenelm's is a fine example of that layered history. In the chancel, the east window, a decorated style 3-light design, echoes 14th century craftsmanship, even though much of the tracery has since been renewed. The window is impressive for sure, but the real treasure here lies in the south aisle. It contains an effigy of Sir Ralph de Wisham, a Crusader knight. His son built Woodmanton Manor in 1325, so the monument links the church directly to the manorial landscape we'll cover later. You can just imagine Sir Ralph riding across these Worcestershire hills centuries ago. Just inside the doorway hangs the Royal Achievement, or Royal Arms, reflecting Clifton's unusual status as a royal borough. It's a perfect teaser for the stories we'll uncover later about markets, fairs and manorial power. In all, this church embodies Clifton's journey from a Domesday-era community to a medieval borough, through Victorian revival and into the present day. Okay, so the church here is open daily, and it's a little bit different in here than the church in Lower Sapey. Remember, it had nothing in it, no fixtures and fittings. Well, this one's got everything. This one's got pews, windows, stained glass, the whole lot, the whole works in here. And there's lots to see, actually, in here. There's the chancel. There's some nice stained glass there. And then over here, at the back of the church, you've got the font, but behind that, you've also got this nice little area. Now, we see areas like this in all churches, don't we? But this is quite good. There's some good little bits and bobs here. A little model of the church here. Look at this. Isn't that amazing? That's fabulous. And let's go out of the door, because I spotted something else on the way in here. Now, this door is really, really heavy. Very heavy, that door. Look at this. In the porch, we've got a funeral bier. Now, we don't see very many of those, do we? That's brilliant. And there's one more thing I want to show you as well, which, if I just shut this door, out of the porch, to the lit gate, there's something on the wall which is also worth a mention here. Now, it says on this gate, please shut the gate, so I'll make sure to do that. Here we go, through the gate to the wall, and here you can see there are 2 stones, one to commemorate the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II, and this one to commemorate the coronation of our current King, Charles III. The Lion is next. Now, imagine arriving here in the 13th or 14th century along the ancient route between Worcester and Tenbury Wells. The original manor house of Clifton stood on this very site, long before it became an inn. This was once the administrative heart of the manor. By 1270, Clifton had been granted that royal borough status, with a weekly market and a 4-day fair. Standing outside the Lion, it's easy to picture medieval stalls lining the street, with the manor house at the centre of the action. Over time, as travel increased, the site naturally evolved into an inn serving those on the road. Today, the Lion is a restaurant and a pub, but its role hasn't changed. It's still a place where people gather, rest, and exchange news. Clifton upon Team was part of the Stanford Court estate until 1932, when most houses and farms were sold at auction. The Lion would have been part of that estate, and so its fortunes were tied to those of the landowners. As we move on, imagine the layers of people who've crossed this threshold: monks, drovers, soldiers, estate workers, and now holidaymakers. This isn't just a pub, it's a crossroads of centuries. From the Lion, we stroll to the playing field on Pound Lane. This shift in scenery takes us from medieval and manorial history into the social fabric of modern Clifton. Historically, this land may have been meadow or communal pasture. Standing here, you can talk about continuity. Anglo-Saxon villagers once brought pigs to forage in Clifton Wood, and in contrast today, children play football here and families gather for events. The function, a shared community space, has barely changed. Speaking of games, here's the Bowls Club. The clipped lawn and quiet geometry of the green offer a different kind of heritage, one rooted in ritual and sociability. Heritage lives in rhythms, and the soft clack of bowls is now a rhythm with a more modern touch. The Blue Shot Drive estate now. This represents the late 20th and early 21st century chapter of Clifton's story. Cul-de-sacs, driveways and setback houses reflect modern planning and car-based living. Yet, the estate still sits on the same high ground above the Team, connected to the same ancient road network. You see, Clifton has evolved from a manor to an estate village and then to that of a modern parish, and Blue Shot Drive is part of that long continuum. Our next stop is Clifton upon Team Primary School, which sits at the heart of the Team Valley, serving its rural Worcestershire community with the charm and close-knit feel you'd expect from any village school. With around 78 pupils on roll and a capacity of 105, the school embraces mixed-age learning, outdoor exploration and a strong sense of belonging, making it a central part of village life for families across Clifton and the surrounding hamlets. The school's ethos is built around curiosity, teamwork, perseverance, understanding and self-awareness, values collectively known as the Clifton Way. This has helped Clifton upon Team Primary be recognised for its positive culture and high expectations. Ofsted's 2023 inspection noted that pupils behave very well and enjoy coming to school. The school concentrates its efforts on the 4 to 11 age range, offering a solid foundation for lifelong learning, and it's all managed by the current head teacher, Julie Wills. After the Stanford Court estate was broken up in 1932, Clifton shifted from estate-dominated life to a more mixed, owner-occupied pattern. Resultingly, the village hall became a place where everyone met on equal terms. The village hall is one of Clifton's most important modern assets. It's one of those classic Worcestershire village hubs that quietly does everything, hosting meetings, celebrations, clubs, classes, and the everyday gatherings that knit a rural parish together. Although the building has seen updates over the years, it still carries the atmosphere of a place shaped by generations of local use. Inside, the hall offers a flexible main space that can shift from children's parties to parish council meetings to lively quiz nights without missing a beat. As we head towards Kennel Road and Manor Road next, you do get the impression of just how tightly the village's core is woven. A church, a pub, a school, a village hall, a shop, a bowls club and a playing field, all within a short walk. Okay, there are two notice boards outside the village hall. There's an old one, which I think this is, and then that one up there is a new one. This one's got pins on it, so this is the one I'm going to use. And there we go. Clifton upon Team has been visited by TVI. But we're not quite done with this place just yet. We've still got quite a lot to see. Now, opposite this board is Kennel Road, and we're heading up there next. Now we're on the main street, known to everyone as the Village. It's Clifton's historic spine. Listed buildings line the street, their materials and roof lines forming a visual timeline from medieval to modern. This was once the axis of the Royal Borough's market and fair. Its survival owes much to Clifton's position, connected but slightly off the main modern routes, a place where history could settle and stay. This is the Village store. It's a small but vital part of this central street. Its predecessors would have been those medieval market stalls and 19th century estate shops. Now the locals rely on a more modern convenience store. Clifton's position on an ancient salt route made it a natural supply point. Today the store continues that role, just with milk and parcels instead of grain and salt. The store shows the daily life of the village, proof that Clifton is a living community and not just a heritage postcard. And then just a few steps away from the shop, you have what looks to be an old post office. Here, look, you see it's got a pillar box there, Georgian pillar box as well. Clearly not a post office anymore, it looks like it's a house now. And speaking of houses, that's all there is now between here and the green, which we saw earlier. There's the phone box on the green, a couple of benches and stuff like that. And then the road bends back towards the Lion and the church, and that is our circuit of Clifton upon Team. We're not done with this episode just yet though, because now we have to go out to the east and catch a load of other things which are also within the parish boundaries. One of those things is Woodmanton Manor. I can't get access to that because it's a private property, so here's some pictures. This is Woodmanton Manor, one of the parish's most evocative sites. As we know, in St Kenelm's Church there lies the effigy of Sir Ralph de Wisham, whose son built this manor in 1325. The de Wishams would have looked back to St Kenelm's as their parish centre. Woodmanton would later become part of the Stanford Court estate. Contrast this with the former manor site under the Lion. One became an elite residence, the other a public inn. Both, though, still express the medieval manorial system that shaped Clifton. Our knowledge of Woodmanton's origins comes from local historical research linking it directly to the de Wisham family. Few parishes can make such a clear connection between a church monument and a manorial site. Although today it appears primarily as a handsome early 19th century farmhouse, the site's origins run far deeper. The manor stands within the remains of a medieval moat, and the complex includes the base of a 14th century tower, hinting it was once a fortified residence. The most ancient part of the complex is the former chapel or kitchen wing, a timber-framed structure dating back to the 14th century as well, although it was later altered across the 16th to the 19th centuries. Its interior still preserves remarkable medieval carpentry. There are massive tie beams, curved braces forming a two-centred arch, and moulded wall plates that speak to a building of high quality and ecclesiastical influence. A blocked window in the north wall adds a further touch of Gothic character. Attached to the main house is the outbuilding range with that circular tower base. This tower, projecting into the moat, may relate to a licence to crenellate granted in 1332 to John de Wisham when local gentry sought both prestige and protection. The present farmhouse, built in around 1827, completes the picture, a neat red brick villa with a refined stuccoed portico in the Sanean style. This Georgian layer softens the site's medieval edges, giving Woodmanton Manor the appearance of a genteel, rural residence. Regardless, it still sits atop centuries of history. Today, the manor stands as one of Clifton-upon-Team's most significant heritage assets, quietly impressive, richly textured, and a vivid testament to the parish's deep medieval past. In the car now, we're driving along Old Road. Now, the name Old Road hints at an earlier alignment, and indeed there was one. The main road towards the River Teme now bypasses this next section, a classic example of modern engineering shifting traffic elsewhere. Despite that, there is something to see on this old route. Clifton's prosperity depended on connections, including the lanes feeding into this road, and sort of by extension to that, there was an inn that grew beside it. The New Inn is a modern counterpart to the Lion, not medieval but firmly rooted in Clifton's long tradition of welcoming travellers. Its layout reflects 20th century travel, cars instead of horses, and wide access instead of narrow lanes. Rural pubs have changed over time here, especially after the 1932 estate sale. The New Inn, though, hasn't altered that much in terms of what it does. It still serves both locals and visitors, continuing the parish's long history of roadside hospitality. The New Inn is Clifton-upon-Team's classic country pub, welcoming, well-loved and beautifully positioned with views across the Teme Valley. It's the sort of place that feels instantly familiar, a proper village local with a relaxed atmosphere. Food is a major part of its appeal. Diners highlight the quality of the cooking, the well-presented dishes, and the excellent value for money, with particular affection for the beer-battered fish and chips and the Sunday roast. In a rural parish where the pub is often the beating heart of village life, the New Inn stands out as a place where good food, good company, and a genuine sense of welcome come together. From the New Inn, we head to Pitlands Farm Holidays. This is a classic example of how rural farms diversified in the late 20th century. The slopes here once supported mixed farming in the form of crop rotation, oxen ploughing, and even honey from local bees. Today, though, holiday lodges sit on top of that long agricultural history. Pitlands Farm Holidays is a long-established family-run retreat set in 25 acres of orchards, lakes and landscape gardens on the edge of Clifton-upon-Team. It's designed as a peaceful rural escape, offering guests a mix of comfort, nature and space to unwind. With over 25 years of welcoming visitors, the farm has built a reputation for friendliness and attention to detail. The site offers 8 self-catering properties ranging from cosy bungalows to spacious lodges and the characterful Chaff House. Many units come with private hot tubs and are all fully equipped for stress-free stays with modern kitchens, comfortable living areas and outdoor seating. There are 2 coarse fishing lakes at the heart of the farm, offering peaceful spots for anglers of all abilities. A well-equipped games room, children's adventure playground and circular walking routes ensure there's plenty to do without ever leaving the grounds. As we descend to the B4204 bridge over the River Teme, the landscape shifts dramatically. The high ridge of Clifton gives way to a river corridor below. The Teme has always been both a barrier and a lifeline here. River crossing points like this shaped trade routes, parish boundaries, and the success of trading villages like Clifton. The bridge here may be modern, but the need for a safe crossing is ancient, a perfect lead-in to our final stop. I'm pleased the sun's come out now because, as you saw driving down here, there's some beautiful hills around Clifton-upon-Team, and to finish with, we're going to be heading into those hills. We're going to go over there. Now up there's the site of an ancient castle. From the bridge, we've made our way to the site of Ham Castle. Even though little survives above ground, the earthworks and the landscape do the talking here. This mound represents the defensive, strategic side of Clifton's story. A castle here allowed its owners to control movement along the Teme, oversee farmland and project authority. Many early castles in Worcestershire began as Norman motte and bailey structures, but were later softened into manor houses as warfare changed. Ham Castle fits neatly into the royal and ecclesiastical interest in Clifton. In 934 AD, King Athelstan granted Clifton to the monks of St Peter's at Worcester. In those times it was known as Cliston Ultra Tame, which literally meant Clifton beyond the Teme. Later in 1270, when Henry III granted Clifton that royal borough status, a castle in this valley made perfect sense in a place that mattered to kings, monks and landowners alike. Much of what we know about Ham Castle comes from a blend of documents, archaeology and reading the land itself. The ridges, hollows and platforms are clues. Just as the effigy of Sir Ralph de Wisham in St Kenelm's anchors the story of Woodmanton Manor, here the lumps and bumps anchor a narrative of medieval defence and lordship along the Team. Ham Castle was essentially a fortified house that was partly burnt in 1605 before being besieged during the English Civil War. Tradition says it was damaged by the Parliamentary Army, whose cannonballs have been found on the banks of the Team opposite this very mound. The diary of Mistress Joyce Jeffreys, who took refuge here from the Parliamentary forces, contains various entries of fees paid for the burying and digging up of trunks and other property. This led to the discovery of a chest containing gold and silver and other kinds of metals. The vault in which the chest was found was in the middle of an ancient fort made in the fashion of a half moon. From the diary, it appears that General Gilbert Gerard, the governor of Worcester, came to Ham Castle on the 12th of July 1645 and left the next day. The 17th century house, which replaced the castle, was burnt to the ground in 1887. Though much defaced and altered before its final disappearance, the old house retained traces of ancient stateliness in its massive staircase, oak bookshelves of its library, and its beautiful garden terraces. By the 18th century, when the Winnington family held the manor of Clifton, Ham Castle's value was more agricultural and picturesque than defensive. After the Stanford Court estate was sold in 1932, that chapter changed again. Here at the edge of the parish by the river, you can see how geography shaped everything. The high spur of Clifton, the river crossing, the manorial houses, and the defensive site at Ham Castle. Every stop we visited fits into that same framework. And so we come to the end, having gone from an Anglo-Saxon settlement high above the Team to a medieval castle on the riverbank itself. Clifton isn't a collection of isolated sites, it's a single interlocking system bound together by roots, ridges and the people who've lived here for centuries. If you leave with that mental map, plus a few vivid images like the wooden spire struck by lightning, the Crusader effigy and the bustle of a medieval Thursday market, then you've truly seen Clifton upon Team. Hello folks, welcome back to the Malvern Hills for episode number 3. Now behind me there you can see we've got a now familiar river. We saw this river at the end of yesterday's episode. That there is the River Team, and I'm standing on a bridge over the Team here that's called the New Mill Bridge, and you can find this on the boundary between two parishes which we will be covering this week. The one that's over there, you have to wait until Friday for that one, but the one that's over here we're going to cover today. Have a look around us. You can see there's plenty of hills, and hills are a big thing in this place. Welcome to Shelsley Walsh. Shelsley Walsh, shallow clearing held by the Walsh family. Continuing through the Malvern Hills today, welcome to Shelsley Walsh, where English history, rural tradition and motorsport legend all sit within a single winding valley. Today I'll take you from the quiet banks of the River Team to the roar of one of the world's oldest motorsport venues. For centuries this was known as Little Shelsley to distinguish it from Shelsley Beauchamp across the river. Its early development followed the classic pattern of Team Valley settlements, small clusters of farmsteads, fertile land for hops, fruit and corn, and a close relationship with the surrounding woodland and river landscape. The Walsh family became central to the village's identity when Sir Henry Llewellys acquired the manor in the reign of Edward I. Their name eventually attached itself to the settlement, giving us Shelsley Walsh. The Walshes remained influential in the area until the early 18th century. At the heart of the village stands St Andrew's Church, built in the early 12th century and largely constructed of local tufa stone. Its Norman nave and 13th century chancel survive today, and the building was sensitively restored in 1859 by the architect George Truefit. Shelsley Walsh is now best known for the Shelsley Walsh Speed Hill Climb, the oldest continuously used motorsport venue in the world. Its origins lie in 1905, when landowner Montague Taylor offered one of his farm tracks for early motor racing experiments. The course quickly became a landmark of British motorsport, drawing competitors and spectators from across the country. It makes Shelsley Walsh one of Worcestershire's most unusual and memorable places. We'll begin this one at a southern bridge over the River Team, but from there we'll drive into the village itself, exploring how this tiny settlement evolved through medieval landholding, agricultural change and the influence of the Walsh family. We'll pause at the courtyard, the historic heart of the manor estate. It was once home to various notable figures, and one of those was Sir John Walsh, involved in the aftermath of the Gunpowder Plot. Then comes the iconic Shelsley Walsh Speed Hill Climb, founded in 1905 and still a jewel of British engineering heritage. Finally, we'll drive up to Willow Tree Barn, taking in the landscape that shaped and has been shaped by nearly 1,000 years of recorded history. As we begin at the southern bridge over the River Team, we're standing at a natural boundary that's defined Shelsley Walsh for centuries. The village lies on the western bank of the river, and this crossing has long served as a main southern approach. The Domesday Book records Shelsley Walsh as Cheldersley, meaning Scald's Clearing or Shallow Valley. The river would have been central to that early community, providing water, fish and fertile meadows. Its presence also explains why the parish remained agriculturally focused for most of its history. By the medieval period, this river marked the distinction between Shelsley Walsh on this side of the Team and Shelsley Beauchamp on the opposite bank. In those times, they were named Little and Great Shelsley, respectively. The bridge, or ford before it, would have been the key link between the two, especially for churchgoers, traders and farm labourers. In the 13th and 14th centuries, when the Walsh family rose to prominence here, the river valley became part of their estate. Sir Henry Le Wallis, the first of the family to hold the manor in the reign of Edward I between 1272 and 1307, would have known this crossing well. It connected his lands to the wider county of Worcestershire. The river has also shaped the parish's isolation. Even today, Shelsley Walsh remains one of the smallest parishes in Worcestershire, with a population of only 31 recorded in 2021. The bridge marks the threshold between the wider world and this secluded valley. So of course the team is in a valley. We're in the valley bottom here because we're right next to the river. Well, Shelsley Walsh itself, the actual village, is up in the hills over there, and there's one hill in particular a lot of people know very, very well around here because it's to do with motorsport. We'll get to that in a few moments time. Let's drive up into the village and see what else it's got. Driving into the village, you'll notice how the landscape narrows into a steep-sided valley. This geography shaped the parish's development. Limited space meant a small population, scattered farms and a tight-knit community. Even in the 19th century, directories described it as a tiny settlement with only a handful of dwellings. In 1831, the parish had just 57 inhabitants, and by 1868 it consisted of 2 farmhouses and 9 cottages dotted across some 410 acres that grew hops, fruit and corn. After the Walsh family's tenure ended in the early 18th century, the land passed to tenants such as Joseph Smith, a renowned breeder of Hereford cattle in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The road we're travelling on was once the main access to the manor estate. As the lane bends towards the church and manor complex, you're entering the historic core of the parish, a cluster of medieval, Tudor and Victorian structures that have remained remarkably unchanged for centuries. St Andrew's Church is the oldest surviving building in Shelsley Walsh, with origins in the early 12th century. Its Norman foundations mark the moment when Shelsley Walsh became a distinct ecclesiastical community. Shelsley Walsh may originally have been part of Clifton-upon-Thames parish, a link still hinted at by a pension paid to Clifton's rector as late as 1535. By 1287, this was certainly a parish in its own right, because the Walsh family held the right to appoint the rector. The current structure of this church is largely 13th century, built of travertine stone and later restored in 1859. Its modest size reflects the tiny population it served, yet its craftsmanship is exceptional. Inside the church lies the wooden altar tomb of Francis Walsh, who died in 1593. One of the church's most remarkable features is its beautifully carved rood screen. Unusually, the screen returns into the nave to enclose a small chantry chapel, a layout described as almost unique in England. The churchyard and surrounding landscape would have been the centre of community life for centuries. Baptisms, marriages, funerals and feast days all took place here, binding the small population together. Today, St Andrews remains a peaceful and atmospheric place, its stone walls carrying nearly 900 years of parish memory. As we leave the church, we step towards the adjoining manor complex, the historic heart of Shelsley Walsh. So those two notices that you've just seen there, I'm just going to read them to you in case you couldn't see what they said. So this one on the left hand side says St Andrew, Shelsley Walsh. The church and manor house make a good group in a beautiful setting in the Teme Valley. The church dates from the 12th and 13th centuries and was drastically restored in 1859. The walling is mainly of travertine, a local stone here. The late 15th century screen is the finest in the county. The south section is returned to form a parclose. There's a good table tomb in wood of 1596 and many 15th century tiles in the church floor. And the other one's about Jack Summers, 1906 to 2005. In the 1970s, this church was in a bad condition and in grave danger of being declared redundant. Between 1977 and 1981, Jack Summers led the group who raised the funds needed to restore and repair the fabric. Without his efforts, this church would be closed for worship today. Well, it's definitely not closed. As you can see, it's open. So let's have a little sneaky look inside and see what else we can see in here. So first of all, we've got the font on the right hand side here, and then we've got a window with some bell ropes, and then if we turn this way we can see that screen, the finest in the county apparently. Well, there it is. If that's the finest in the county, then who am I to disbelieve what the notice says, eh? Let's head forward into the chancel. There's some lights in here as well, which is good. It means we can see what we're doing. It's not like the one in Clifton-upon-Thames was yesterday, very dark. There's the tomb in the corner, and some stained glass there in the chancel. Brilliant ceiling here, look at this. Some stars on that wood. That's quite fancy, isn't it? I really like that. And, you know, in general, I think this little church is an absolute beauty. It's fabulous. Well worth a visit to this church here in the Teme Valley. But Shelsley Walsh has quite a few other things that people come to it for. There's absolutely no reason to not visit this church, of course. But most people who come to the village are actually coming for something motorsport related. So now we're going to head down there and find out exactly what that is. The courtyard forms part of the old manor site, once home to the Walsh family. The most famous resident was Sir John Walsh, Sheriff of Worcestershire in 1605. He played a role in apprehending suspects after the gunpowder plot, so even this quiet valley was touched by a national drama. The manor house itself was timber framed, partly rebuilt over time and once surrounded by a moat. Though altered, the site retains its historic layout and atmosphere. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the estate passed through several hands. Among the number was one Joseph Smith, a Hereford cattle breeder. His agricultural innovations would have shaped the surrounding fields and farm buildings. Later, in the late 19th century, the estate came under the tenancy of Montague Taylor. Now, his interest in modern technology would change the parish forever. It was Taylor who offered one of his farm tracks for a new kind of sport, motor hill climbing, setting the stage for Shelsley Walsh's global fame. The Shelsley Walsh Speed Hill Climb began in 1905, making it the oldest motorsport venue in the world that's still operating on its original course. Its creation marked a dramatic shift in the parish's identity, from a quiet agricultural community to an international motorsport landmark. The first event was organised by the Midland Automobile Club, which continues to run the hill climb today. Early competitors drove machines that were little more than motorised carriages, yet they tackled the steep, narrow track with astonishing bravery. The course rises 328 feet over a distance of 1,000 yards, with gradients as steep as 1 in 6. Its challenge has remained unchanged since it became a thing in 1905, and that's a real rarity in motorsport history. During the early 20th century, Shelsley Walsh became a proving ground for engineering innovation. Superchargers, lightweight chassis, and new fuels were tested here long before they became mainstream. In the 1920s and 1930s, the hill attracted famous drivers such as Raymond Mays, who set multiple records here. The venue soon became synonymous with British motorsport excellence. During the Second World War, events paused but resumed soon after, continuing the tradition of competition. The post-war years saw the rise of new classes of cars, from nimble single-seaters to powerful specials built in sheds and barns across Britain. Many of these machines found their limits and sometimes exceeded them on this very track. In the 1960s and 1970s, Shelsley Walsh remained a cornerstone of the British Hill Climb Championship, drawing crowds who lined the banks and hedgerows to watch the action. The venue still has many historic buildings, including the paddock sheds and its timing hut. Visiting the climb feels like stepping back into the pioneering age of speed. Today, Shelsley Walsh hosts major events, classic car gatherings and championship rounds, all while maintaining the charm and authenticity of its 1905 origins. The drive up to Willow Tree Barn to finish this episode takes us back into the agricultural heart of the parish. From a vantage point at the top, you can see how the steep valley walls and narrow river plain shape the parish's development, limiting expansion but preserving its character. Willow Tree Barn marks the end of our route, offering a final view across a landscape where medieval farming, Tudor politics, Victorian innovation and Edwardian motorsport all coexist in a single remarkable village. Shelsley Walsh is a place where English history unfolds in layers, from its Domesday origins through the medieval Walsh family, Tudor intrigue, Victorian agriculture, and the pioneering spirit of 1905 that created the world's oldest hill climb. As you leave the parish, you carry with you the contrasts that define it: the quiet river crossing, the ancient church, the historic manor, and the thunderous hill climb. Few places in England offer such a rich blend of heritage in such a small and beautiful setting. Hello folks, welcome back to the Malvern Hills once again. Now in this episode we're going to be seeing the second of the Shelsleys, but there's no actual village here. It's just a lot of scattered hamlets and farmsteads and, you know, granges and stuff like that. It's all farmland basically, and the river Team is also a feature of it too. There is one hamlet which is something approaching a village, which is where I'm standing right now. It's a place called Stanford Bridge, and this is where you can cross the river Team if you so desired. We're going to be crossing the Team on a short walk around this little place. This is the parish of Shelsley Kings. Shelsley Kings, shallow clearing belonging to the Crown. Shelsley Kings is one of Worcestershire's most quietly fascinating rural areas. Although a small parish of just 189 residents, its story is deeply intertwined with the neighbouring manors of Shelsley Beauchamp and Shelsley Walsh. Today in the Malvern Hills, we're in Shelsley Kings, a small scattered rural area northwest of Worcester. Unlike Shelsley Beauchamp and Shelsley Walsh, it never developed into a nucleated village. Instead, it spread across the slopes above the River Team. The Domesday Book records 2 manors at Shelsley, both held within the Doddingtree Hundred. By the early 13th century, these manors had passed to 2 powerful families, the Beauchamps and the Walshes, giving rise to the names Shelsley Beauchamp and Shelsley Walsh. Shelsley Kings, however, was different. It did not belong to either manor, but formed a detached portion of the royal manor of Martley, held directly by the Crown at the time of Domesday and remaining in royal ownership until 1196. Much of what we'll explore today can be traced back to the Domesday Book, medieval land disputes, and centuries of agricultural life. It's a landscape shaped by more than 1,000 years of English history. The parish boundaries we recognise today were shaped by ecclesiastical politics. A chapel at Shelsley Beauchamp was raised to full parish status in 1194, sparking centuries of debate over whether Shelsley Kings belonged to Martley or not. Let's find out. When civil administration evolved under the Poor Laws, Shelsley Kings again stood apart. It was treated separately from the rest of Shelsley Beauchamp, and in 1866 it became an independent parish, even though it remained part of the ecclesiastical parish of Shelsley Beauchamp. Today, with a small population and a landscape of farms, commons and quiet lanes, Shelsley Kings preserves the character of a historic borderland parish, shaped not by a village centre, but by centuries of rural life, royal ties and the enduring geography of the Team Valley. In this one, we'll learn about the bridge that linked the manors, the modern retail complex that stands on historic farmland, and the long, winding road towards Shelsley Beauchamp, which passes a raft of old wooded commons. It's a fun one, this. Let's go and see it. Our tour begins at the Tollgate Cottage in a hamlet called Stanford Bridge, which is the nearest thing you get to a village here. By the 1830s, directories describe Shelsley Kings as a hamlet closely tied to Stanford Bridge, with 264 inhabitants recorded in 1831. Although this cottage itself is of later construction, this site reflects the era of turnpike trusts, which flourished from the 18th century until their decline in the late 19th century. Turnpikes were a vital service in rural Worcestershire, where river crossings and muddy lanes often hindered travel. The Stanford Bridge crossing of the River Teme has been important since medieval times, linking the royal manor lands of Martley with the Beauchamp and Walsh estates. Though this cottage has been adapted over time, its position and proportions still hint at its former role. It regulated movement and collected fees from carts, livestock drovers and riders. The toll system was abolished nationally in 1888, and toll houses like this one were sold into private ownership, often becoming cottages, as did this one at Stanford Bridge. A short walk brings us to the Bridge, the local pub that served generations of travellers and villagers. While the current building reflects later architectural styles, inns have stood near this river crossing for centuries, providing food, ale and lodging to those navigating the Teme Valley. During the 19th century, when Shelsley Kings was still administratively tied to Shelsley Beauchamp under the poor law system, pubs like this were essential. They were places where parish notices were shared, labour was hired, and news from Worcester or Tenbury Wells filtered through. The pub's location beside the river made it a natural stopping point for those travelling between the manors of the Shelsleys. Given that Shelsley Kings became a separate civil parish in 1866, the Bridge would have been among the first places where locals discussed their new administrative identity. The Bridge also reflects the long-standing agricultural character of the area. With Shelsley Kings covering 1,034 acres by the late 19th century, farming families relied on such inns for social life, trade connections and seasonal gatherings. Today, the Bridge continues that tradition. Okay, so at the back of the pub there, the Bridge Hotel, you've got a lane that runs around a corner, and there are two bridges over the River Teme. There's a footbridge, which is the one we're going to cross in a second, and there's a road bridge just there, you see, and that takes the main road over the river as well. So let's go and check out the river here in Shelsley Kings and see what's on the other side. Now it's time to cross the River Teme on the actual bridge. This river has long formed both a physical and an administrative boundary. In the 13th century, it separated the Beauchamp Manor to the east from the Walsh Manor to the west, giving rise to the names Shelsley Beauchamp and Shelsley Walsh. The bridge here has been rebuilt and repaired many times, as floods have always been a feature of the Teme Valley. Earlier crossings would have been simple fords or timber structures, gradually replaced by stone as traffic increased during the turnpike era of the 18th and 19th centuries. Standing mid-bridge, you can imagine medieval travellers making their way between Martley's royal lands, which included Shelsley Kings until 1196, and the Beauchamp estate on the other side. This crossing was not just a physical link, but a point of jurisdictional tension. This was especially prominent during the centuries-long dispute over parish boundaries that was only resolved in 1420. Today, the bridge remains a powerful symbol of continuity, a place where centuries of movement, trade and negotiation have flowed as steadily as the river beneath. Now, I don't usually talk about political things on this channel because that's not my sort of scene, but someone's done something here which I think is worth noting. Harriet Baldwin, MP, voted to dump raw sewage into our local rivers 20th to the 10th, 2021. You can find this sort of fake blue plaque, I suppose, on the bridge crossing the River Teme here. I don't do politics, but that's something I definitely don't agree with. Continuing along the road, we arrive at Mill Farm, a modern rural retail complex that stands on land with deep agricultural roots. The name itself hints at the milling heritage of the Team Valley, where water-powered mills operated from medieval times through to the 19th century. The current businesses here are contemporary, with a transformation occurring at Mill Farm that began in the late 20th century. Now a retail and leisure destination, it mirrors wider rural diversification trends that began in the same period. The Den Cafe Bar continues the tradition of hospitality once centred around inns like the Bridge. Where 19th century travellers might have stopped for ale and bread, today's visitors enjoy coffee, meals and local produce. Mill Farm is a modern expression of Worcestershire's rural enterprise. From here on in, it's all driving. Leaving Mill Farm, we join the B4203, a road that threads through the north edge of Shelsley Kings. This area was historically part of the Royal Manor of Martley, remaining under direct royal ownership until 1196, when it passed into private hands. As we drive, we'll pass Kingswood Common, noted in 19th century descriptions as forming part of the parish's eastern boundary. Commons like it were essential resources for grazing and timber, shaping the agricultural rhythms of local life. Further along this lengthy old drive, we'll pass Shelsley Grange, historically one of the key farmsteads in the parish. Its presence reflects the dispersed settlement patterns typical of the Shelsleys, which recorded 2 manors in the area, but no central village at Shelsley Kings. This drive certainly gives you a sense of the distances involved in ancient travel out here. Before modern roads, these lanes would have been muddy, narrow and difficult, especially in the winter. I certainly wouldn't want to drive these roads when they're icy. Passing old hedgerows and field boundaries, we see traces of enclosure and agricultural reform, processes that reshaped the landscape from the 17th century onwards, influencing everything from farm sizes to parish administration. The roads around here now offer views across the Team Valley towards Shelsley Walsh and its famous hill climb, but as we approach Shelsley Beauchamp, we enter the territory of the medieval Beauchamp family, who secured parish status for their chapel in 1194. That act triggered centuries of debate over whether Shelsley Kings belonged to Martley or not. Although small, this episode has taken us through more than 9 centuries of history. Along the way, we've explored how Shelsley Kings evolved from royal landholdings to a distinct civil parish in 1866, shaped by medieval disputes, agricultural life, and the ever-present River Team. What emerges is a portrait of a parish without a village, yet rich in identity, a place defined by its farms, river crossings, commons, and connections. Whether through toll houses, bridges, inns, or modern cafes, Shelsley Kings continues to welcome travellers just as it has for centuries. Hello folks, welcome back to Malvern Hills for the last time this week, and today we're in the final of the three Shelsleys. We've seen Shelsley Walsh already, we've seen Shelsley Kings, and now we're in the last one. Now in neither of those two previous parishes was there a school, and I didn't think there was one here either, but apparently there is, because if you enter the village from the north on this road here, that house on the left you can see there, that is the old school, or the school house, to give it its actual name. You can find this in the beautiful parish of Shelsley Beauchamp. Shelsley Beauchamp, shallow clearing held by the Beauchamp family. Today on TVI we're in Shelsley Beauchamp, a small but historically significant parish on the eastern bank of the River Teme, recorded in the Domesday Book as one of two manors in the area. This is the third of the three Shelsley triplets. By the early 13th century, the two Domesday manors had diverged into Shelsley Beauchamp on the eastern side of the Teme and Shelsley Walsh on the western side, each taking the name of its respective manorial family. The first part of its name refers to shallow ground or a shielded place. The second part of the name, Beauchamp, arrived in the 12th century when the powerful Beauchamp family acquired the manor and left their mark on the settlement's identity. A chapel of ease existed at Shelsley Beauchamp by 1194, but Simon Beauchamp successfully petitioned for it to be raised to full parish church status, separating the settlement ecclesiastically from Martley. Disputes over Shelsley Kings then continued for generations. Over the centuries, the parish boundaries shifted. The dispute over whether Shelsley Kings belonged to this parish was finally settled in 1420, when an agreement confirmed its inclusion, though with a complicated tithe-sharing arrangement with Martley's rector. Today, Shelsley Beauchamp remains a small rural community, just 238 residents at the 2021 census, but its landscape is dense with stories. From medieval towers to Victorian rebuilding, from Civil War skirmishes to 20th century aviation, the parish offers a surprising depth of history. With its historic cottages and farms clustered above the Teme Valley, this has deep medieval roots and a landscape shaped by centuries of farming, woodland and river life. It's all neatly tied together by All Saints Church in the heart of the village itself. Most of that was rebuilt in 1846 in a 13th century Gothic style by the architect James Cranston. Its Victorian reconstruction created the building's present form, a nave with north and south aisles under a single roof, a three-bay chancel and a north vestry. The design is full of thoughtful medieval revival details, trefoil-headed windows, dog-tooth mouldings and foliate capitals, reflecting the 19th century enthusiasm for restoring rural churches to what was seen as their proper Gothic character. In this one, we'll also encounter a small village hall which serves all three Shelsleys. We'll also see the River Teme again, as well as an airstrip that sits beside it. Ending the episode will take us up to an old quarry as we leave the Shelsleys and this first run in the Malvern Hills behind. Our tour begins at the village hall, which serves Shelsley Beauchamp, Shelsley Walsh and Shelsley Kings. A 20th century creation, this is the physical embodiment of the cooperation between the three, a relationship documented as early as the 13th century. The hall stands on land that would have once been part of some agricultural holdings. In the 19th century, Shelsley Beauchamp was still described as a largely farming community, with the parish covering just over 5 kilometres squared, a figure that remains unchanged today. Although the hall is modern, the tradition of communal gathering in Shelsley Beauchamp goes back to the medieval period. Parish records from 1538, when the earliest registers began, show a community deeply tied to the church calendar, and All Saints Church is next. Now, if you stand in the car park here at the village hall, you can see Shelsley Walsh over the River Teme. Let me point it out to you if you can't see it. So if you look between the gap in the trees there, you might just be able to see the spire of the church there in Shelsley Walsh, and obviously the rest of the village is just next to that. And of course above that you have the hill where the speed hill climb is. All Saints Church is the oldest surviving building in Shelsley Beauchamp, and its story begins in the 12th century when the Beauchamp family established a chapel of ease here. By 1194, Simon Beauchamp had successfully petitioned for the chapel to be raised to full parish status. That act separated Shelsley Beauchamp from Martley's ecclesiastical control, and as we know from yesterday's episode, it caused a bit of a problem for anyone who lived within Shelsley Kings. It was eventually resolved, of course. This church played a central role in the long-running dispute, which ended with a 1420 agreement that settled the matter. It required 2/3 of Shelsley Kings' tithes to go to Martley's rector and only 1/3 to Shelsley Beauchamp, a compromise that lasted 4 centuries. The oldest part of the church visible today is the 14th century tower, a sturdy medieval structure that's watched over the Team Valley for more than 600 years. Its survival is remarkable, given that the rest of the church was almost entirely rebuilt in the Victorian period between 1846 and 1847. During the mid-19th century, many medieval churches were restored, or in some cases dramatically reimagined, to suit contemporary tastes. All Saints is a classic example of this movement, blending medieval foundations with Victorian Gothic revival. Inside, the 12th or perhaps 13th century font with its circular bowl and cylindrical stem is one of the oldest features in the building. Fragments of a perpendicular style screen flank the chancel arch, their traceried panels offering a glimpse of the church's late medieval interior. Today, All Saints remains a Grade 2 listed building, recognised for both its medieval core and its high-quality Victorian reconstruction. So you heard the church bells striking there just before we came into this church, and they were chiming the wrong time because it's actually 1 o'clock right now, so there should just have been one single bong, but there were actually 12, so someone's not done the right thing with the clock, have they, at some point? Anyway, we are inside the church, and in the chancel here we've got a few things on the wall. Got a couple of brass plaques here. And on the other side, there's not a lot. But there is one thing I have noticed of interest in here, and that's down here. In fact, there are 2 things. Look at these chests, 2 oak chests. I wonder what's in that one. That one's firmly locked shut, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. This one doesn't have a lock on it. I wonder what's in here. I wonder if I can open it and have a look inside. Nothing but a load of cobwebs at the moment. But it's fascinating to think what these may have held in times past. I know we speak a lot about these things. We don't often see them though, do we? Okay, let's head back out into the churchyard. And just before we do, you can see above the door here, it says, "My presence shall go with thee." The River Team forms the western boundary of Shelsley Beauchamp, separating it from Shelsley Walsh. This boundary dates back to at least the 13th century when the 2 manors were formally distinguished by their owning families. As we know, just downstream from here once stood Ham Castle, the fortified manor house with medieval origins. During the English Civil War, when the castle became a target for parliamentarian forces, troops loyal to Oliver Cromwell attacked and destroyed it, leaving it in ruins. Though the site lies just outside the parish boundary, the event would have been felt by the people of Shelsley Beauchamp. Local stories tell of items from that raid being found washed up on the banks of the Teme. The Teme itself has a long history of flooding. Medieval farmers would have used the fertile floodplain for grazing, while the higher ground supported arable crops. These patterns are described in the Domesday entries, which mentions a landscape of ploughland, meadow and woodland. For centuries, the river served as a crossing point between the two Shelsleys. Before modern bridges, locals relied on fords and small ferries, especially during the summer months when the water level dropped. Next, we have Shelsley Airstrip, which is a small private landing ground established in the 20th century, reflecting the growing popularity of light aircraft after the Second World War. Whilst modest in scale, it represents a striking contrast to the parish's medieval and agricultural heritage. First recorded in 2011 and still active today, this is unlike many rural airfields. It developed as a small civil aviation site used by private pilots rather than military or commercial operators. Its setting on the high ground above the Teme Valley makes it a practical and unobtrusive flying site. The airstrip is entirely unpaved. It's a countryside airfield rather than a formal airport. Rural Worcestershire has plenty of these farm-based flying sites, which have long supported recreational pilots, microlight enthusiasts, and those who use them for farming purposes. You can't miss that airstrip, by the way, because it's literally right between the River Teme and the church. It's kind of equidistant between the two. Standing here, I can see both. One to my left, one to my right. And in front of me, actually, I've got the best view of all, because there you see the hills above the airstrip. The Malvern Hills, which we are in, of course. And there's plenty more Malvern Hills parishes to see. Of course, this is the last one this week, but I will be out here again to do some more at some point. So from here, all I've got to do is make my way back up towards the village hall where this episode started, and then we're going to take a drive out of Shelsley Beauchamp to cover the last little bit of it, and that'll be this week's videos in the books. Lastly, we have a drive eastwards towards an old quarry which sits on the higher ground east of the village. Quarrying here likely began in the 18th or early 19th century, supplying stone for local farm buildings, boundary walls, and possibly the Victorian rebuilding of All Saints Church in 1846 and 47. The stone extracted would have been transported by horse and cart down the steep lanes into the village. Quarrying was a seasonal occupation, often carried out by farm labourers during quieter agricultural months. Parish records from the 19th century describe a mixed economy of farming, labouring and small-scale rural industries, quarrying among them. As industrial materials became cheaper and more widely available in the 20th century, the quarry eventually fell out of use. Shelsley Beauchamp may be small, but its history is deep. From its appearance in the Domesday Book to the 14th century church tower, the 19th century quarry and the 20th century airstrip, the parish offers a remarkable cross-section of English rural history. As we leave the village, I hope this tour through the first 5 parishes of the Malvern Hills this week has brought some of its stories to life and shown how even the quietest corners of Worcestershire are rich with centuries of human experience. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.